Here at Memorial Hospital today, we're waiting on Mitch McConnell. He's going to make a stop and visit with us. So we've got a good crowd. Mitch is the United States Republican Senate leader. And Corbett here is the Chamber of Commerce president here in Manchester. How you doing, Corbett?
Good. How are you, Ron?
Pretty good. Mitch is already here. He patted me on the back there when he went by. I don't think ran to be here today. Not over here. I don't know. He's probably. I think he's going to be at maybe his next stop. I'm not sure. We got plenty of security. Okay, we're coming in good around the world on Big Barn Radio. BigBarn.us. We're waiting on Republican Senate leader Mitch McConnell. He's already here. Who are you with, young man?
Wall Street Journal.
Wall Street Journal?
Yeah.
Good.
And who are you with?
I'm Ron Curry.
Ron Curry, nice to meet you.
ClaycoNews.com.
Nice.
And we're just starting, we've added internet radio. We're going in our 10th anniversary with Clayco News. And we'll be getting music format and all that stuff going here.
Great.
Probably another few weeks.
Yeah.
Right now we're just able to do live broadcast. I think Erica's going to say something here.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so pleased to see so many people here this afternoon. Thank you for taking time to come out. My name is Erica Skula. I'm the CEO of our community's hospital. We are honored and privileged to have U.S. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell here with us today, and he's going to share some updates with us. Welcome, Senator. I'm also pleased to welcome Senator Robert Stivers, who will be introducing Senator McConnell in a few moments. Senator Stivers is a strong supporter of this community and our hospital. Just wanted to announce that there will be a photo opportunity at the end of the program, if you wish, with Senator McConnell. Thank you all for being here.
I want to welcome everyone here to the hospital today, and let me make a suggestion. We've got a lot of people on that side of the building, and we've got a few seats over here, except they've all kind of filled up. There's a few here, but why don't we try to slide on in so we don't have to speak as loud, if you would. You know, I've got the sheriff and several people. I'll make them push everybody in, or we can send them take care of them one way or another. Now, appreciate everyone coming out here today, and before I introduce our guest, I want to do something, and I want to talk about something that happened here at this hospital that hasn't happened in this state of Kentucky, and has only happened with 160 other hospitals in the United States. And that is the fact that the Manchester Memorial Hospital was given the HIMSS S7 designation, which means they are the first hospital in the state of Kentucky to go paperless, totally paperless. Now, when you think about the University of Kentucky and the University of Louisville and Norton's and Baptist and all the other groups, here's a small rural Eastern Kentucky hospital that is the first in the state to have done this. So with that, Senator McConnell, if you would, I'm going to ask Erica to come up. And we recognized Erica on the Senate floor the other day for this being the first in the state of Kentucky, and would like to present you. We have it rolled up and more, and I think they've got it ready to get framed. But we want to present you with the Senate citation, recognizing you all for being the first at having this federal designation and being a totally paperless facility for the purpose of transferring to the program. Great. All right. Now I want to introduce the Republican leader of the United States Senate. I'm fortunate to have known him for many, many years. When I was first running for election years ago, he traveled with me. He would take me places. He would introduce me to a lot of people. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about a person that when you go out and look to the papers and you hear that the president makes a statement, and the worldwide media, not just the United States media, comes to this man to be an individual to respond to him, and that it is the worldwide media that wants to know what his response is to the United States president, they go to this man. He has served this state longer than any other United States senator. He is the only second person to be the leader of his party in the United States Senate. But what I want to tell people here, because this is not the first time he's been to Manchester, he comes to Manchester again, a little small eastern Kentucky town. He comes to Manchester quite often. This is the second time in his tenure in the last few years he's been to this hospital. But I want to tell a little bit of a story about Senator McConnell. For all that he does in dealing with the national press, the state press, and the international press, I wish I could have gotten a picture of him a few years ago when he sat on the front steps of the United States Capitol with 30 students, middle schoolers, some young high schoolers, and spoke with them that were from Manchester. He didn't, wait on or send somebody else to come see us or see those students. He didn't just come out and say, okay, I want to take a picture and, how y'all doing, and walk back into his office. He sat there for close to 30 minutes with a group of young students from Clay County. And for a person who has the demands on his time, and I have a little bit of knowledge about demands on your time when you're in a leadership role, but he has a leadership role for the whole United States. But even more than that, and I will identify the one person. That night after we got done meeting with Senator McConnell, these young students, Tim Rogers, which I think a lot of y'all will know Tim Rogers, wasn't able to be there because he was getting tickets to the Holocaust Museum for these young students to attend later on that day. Senator McConnell called me and said, well, I know Tim didn't get to be there. He was my pastor. He says, I want him to come back over the next morning, and I want him to come over and visit with me, and I want to bring him back into the office. And I think that was when you were the whip, and you had the office that Kennedy used in the transition period. And it had and I didn't know this, and this is why I remember it so well. He took Tim all around and showed him the different emblems and seals from different states that were used that occupied that, because when you occupy that office, your seal goes up there. So, is he important? Without a doubt, because the worldwide media pays attention to what he says. But to me, he is important because he never forgot where Manchester and Clay County was, because he talked to those children and he took the time out of his schedule for all he does and for all he will do to spend time with us. So with that, I give you the Republican leader and the loudest and most prominent Republican voice in the United States Senate, which happens to be probably one of the more prominent voices in the world because of his position, our United States Senator, Mitch McConnell.
Well, thank you very much, Robert. Let me start by, at the risk of your thinking this is a mutual admiration society, I think speaking of major players, you've got one here in Senate President Robert Stivers. He is the most consequential Republican in Frankfort, sets the agenda, since he leads the majority, sets the agenda in the state Senate, and does an extraordinary job, not only for you, but for the whole state. And I know you're proud of the fact that a son of Clay County rose to be the Senate President, and we're proud of him too. This is the 61st of what could best be described as a hospital town hall meeting. I started about 2 years ago, Erica, going into hospitals all across our state. In the wake of the Obamacare law, I wanted to discuss with administrators and staff and doctors and even patients sometimes the impact of all of this on our state and, of course, on our country. The meetings have been quite enlightening. I've been into big hospitals, medium-sized hospitals. I've done 2 critical access hospitals with 15 beds, the tiniest hospitals we have, up to the biggest. So let's go back to the debate that occurred back in 2008 and remember what it was all about. The situation we found ourselves in 2008, we had a new president with a very large approval rating. He had a very big majority of his party in the House of Representatives, and he had 60 votes of his party in the Senate. And for those of you who have better things to do than be political junkies, 51 gives you a majority, but 60 gives you control, because a lot of things we do in the U.S. Senate require a supermajority of 60. In other words, summing it all up, they had the votes. And so there was an explosion of government activity, but I want to focus on just one part of this explosion of government, and that was Obamacare. What was the driving notion behind this legislation? Actually, it was well intended. The goal was to have more people insured, and we can all agree that that's a good thing. Better to be insured than not be insured, just as a general principle. What was the situation in our country at that time? 85% of Americans had health insurance. Many of them liked it. 15% didn't. Roughly 40 to 45 million Americans were uninsured. Who were these people? They were in basically 2 categories. About half of them were young and healthy and thought they were going to live forever and didn't really spend their money that way. And if you think about it, it's not an irrational decision, given the likelihood of needing it. The other half had a genuine affordability problem. They just didn't have the money. They would have preferred to be insured, but didn't have the money. Our friends on the other side, in order to target this problem of the uninsured, passed a 2,700-page bill. A 2,700-page bill. Not a single member of my party in either the House or Senate voted for it, not because we were trying to deny the president some kind of political victory, but because we thought it was exactly the wrong thing to do. What did the 2,700-page bill do? Well, let's take a look first at the providers of health care, which is you guys, the providers. It took $1 trillion away from the providers of health care through reductions in Medicare reimbursement for hospitals, nursing homes, home health care, hospice, and the like. Reduced provider reimbursements. It levied a new tax on medical devices, think stents, for example. It levied a new tax on health insurance premiums. So you add up the new taxes and the Medicare reimbursement reductions, and you've got $1 trillion hit on the providers of health care over the next 10 years. Now, this was to produce money to provide subsidies for those who were uninsured. I and my colleagues predicted that among the consumers of health care, we've talked about the providers, among the consumers of health care, what you would end up having is higher premiums, fewer choices, and lost jobs. There's nothing I would like better than to be able to stand up here before you and say I was wrong. But everything we predicted has happened. And you see the stories on a daily basis of spiking premiums, fewer choices, and lost jobs. In fact, we have a record number of part-time employees in America now, and Obamacare is one of the reasons for it, because companies are trying to stay below 50 employees to avoid the mandate. Among those who go on the exchange, they find, if they're not signing up for Medicaid, which I'll get to in a minute, an issue that Robert and I share responsibility on and have views on, they find that they don't have as good an option for the same amount of money as what they already had. And many of the people were already insured, but now having to get different insurance. And since the federal government is telling the health insurance companies what they can sell, dictating what they can sell, in other words, the federal government now has determined the business model for health insurance. You end up with a situation for many, many Americans where they have to pay more for less, higher co-payments, higher deductibles, higher premiums. And oh, by the way, your doctor may not be available. You remember the president famously said, if you have your health insurance and you like it, you'll be able to keep it. If you have your doctor and you like him or her, you'll be able to keep him. Well, that's proving not to be true. And it's particularly acute where you are near a county line. Let's take near a state line. Let's take northern Kentucky, for example. Many of those folks get their health care in Ohio. That doesn't work too well under the current system. So this has wreaked havoc with 16% of our economy. And it is, in my view, kind of a metaphor for all the other excess they were engaged in, which I'm not here to talk about today. All this faith in bigger and bigger government leading to greater and greater debt. You know, more and more taxes, regulation, all the rest. And so now we're in the 6th year of this administration, and it's appropriate to ask, how did it all work out? How did it work out? Well, I used Obamacare as an example, but it's going on across the board. This is the slowest recovery after a deep recession since World War II. And it's particularly acute in eastern Kentucky because of the war on coal carried out by regulators with an animus toward our way of life and a desire to put us out of business. They've got a new regulation that's moving. By the way, he couldn't pass any of this stuff through the Congress, but he got a new regulation moving that if it's implemented, there will not be another coal-fired generation plant built in America. And that's not enough. They've got another regulation coming along later targeting existing coal-fired generation plants. So I didn't come in here today to talk about coal exclusively, but it fits the pattern of excessive belief that all the smart people live in Washington, they're going to tell us how to lead our lives, whether it's in healthcare or mining coal. So it's appropriate for you to ask, well, what would you have done differently from Obamacare? Well, let me just say this. I wouldn't have taken a meat axe to the whole American healthcare system. I wouldn't have started out with the notion that we have second-rate health care in this country, which the president and his allies said repeatedly, over and over again, as if it were true. It's not. Instead of taking a meat axe, I would have pulled out a scalpel. A scalpel is a smarter play every time than a meat axe. And here's where I would have started. As all of you guys know, because you're in this daily, health insurance is sold in 50 separate silos, 50 separate states. We ought to tear down the silos and have a national health insurance market pitting all the health insurance companies against each other to keep rates down and quality up. Now, some of the skeptics will say, well, you can't have competition in healthcare. Well, of course you can. And let me remind you of one. that's worked out pretty well that you healthcare providers deal with all the time. Medicare Part D, the prescription drug benefit that came into Medicare about 10 years ago. We set up, over pretty serious opposition, a competitive model that pitted all the health and all the excuse me, all the pharmaceutical companies against each other. And amazingly enough, it's the only federal government program anybody can name that actually came in under budget. So step one, pit all the health insurance companies against each other. Competition can work in certain parts of healthcare just like it can in anything else. Number two, medical malpractice. Thanks. Number two, medical malpractice reform. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands of how many of you have occasionally, maybe on a daily basis, engaged in a test that you thought really probably wasn't warranted because of the fear of litigation. We ought to have a national medical malpractice standard that discourages the kind of frivolous lawsuits that wreak havoc with every healthcare provider in the country. Number three, we ought to allow small businesses to band together. It's currently not permitted to band together into larger groups to have the purchasing power that's helpful in getting better rates of insurance. Now look, I'm not going to try to oversell that this would get every single American health insurance. But let me tell you what the Congressional Research Service, which doesn't work for Republicans or Democrats, said recently about Obamacare if it's fully implemented. Here's what they said. If it's fully implemented, there's still going to be 30 million uninsured. Okay, so we've gone from 40 to 45 million uninsured down to 30 million uninsured. And how much did it cost us? What is the cost-benefit ratio, my friends, of doing all of this, killing all these jobs, reducing consumer choice, taking $1 trillion hit on providers of health care, and after all is said and done, we've still got 30 million uninsured. Let me talk about Medicaid a minute. There was in the original Obamacare legislation a Medicaid mandate that dictated to the states that they raise the standard for Medicaid, and I know your patient mix is very largely Medicare and Medicaid. Would you say 80%?
Yes.
80%. And you're probably hopeful, Erica, that with the Medicaid mandate, maybe you're going to get more back, maybe get more paying patients, right? That's the hope. Okay. Medicaid is a program that has had shared responsibility with state governments. And the federal government in the original legislation said, we pick up the tab for you guys, Robert, for 3 years, 100%. For these newly eligible, as you raise the standard for Medicaid. After that, look out. So many people in the legislature question the decision made optional by the Supreme Court when it said the federal government couldn't make the states take the additional mandate. It was their choice. And apparently in Kentucky, the governor alone can decide to encumber without actions of the legislature, and made the decision to add these additional folks. So even though other states have said no, we're worried about the impact on our state budget down the road, because remember, the two biggest items, correct me if I'm wrong, in every state budget is education and Medicaid, right? Yeah, two biggest items. So as the Medicaid expenses rise, it puts more pressure on education. And inevitably, about the only choice for legislators is to reduce the funding for education, which at the university level means they're going to have to raise tuition. So you got Medicaid competing with education funding at the state level. So many states have said thanks but no thanks. We got more Medicaid responsibility than we can handle already. But Kentucky said yes, and so people like Erica are hoping that you're going to get more back than you lose. But alas, the Kentucky Hospital Association has done a study of what they anticipate will happen over the next 10 years. And here's what they concluded: that even with the new Medicaid mandate and the greater likelihood that you're going to get compensated for these newly eligible people, when you weigh that against all the reductions, the provider reductions, the KHA, Kentucky Hospital Association, predicts Kentucky hospitals will come out $1 billion behind over the next 10 years. So, obviously, I think this was a huge mistake for our country. A big step in the direction of Europeanizing America, and we all know what European healthcare looks like. I'm told the National Health Service in England is the third largest employer in the world. I'm told that only the People's Liberation Army in China and the Indian Railroad Company are bigger in terms of the number of employees. It is an impenetrable bureaucracy. And it's certainly true that everybody in the United Kingdom can say, I got a free healthcare card. But the question is, when are they going to get around to you? And oh, by the way, if you're too old or too this or too this or too that, you may not be eligible at all. It's called rationing. Rationing in a serious way. And ladies and gentlemen, I don't think that's consistent with American values. And I'm not willing to accept the inevitability of Obamacare. And I hope the American people are going to give us an opportunity to go in a different direction. I've said before, and I'll say again today, this was the single worst piece of legislation that's been passed in modern times. I'm having a hard time thinking what's in second place on the worst legislation side. And so I don't want to give up on this and just assume that this is inevitable for the country. This is why we have elections. We'll have one this fall, and we'll have another one in 2016, and we'll have a chance to see whether the American people are satisfied with the condition of our country and where we're headed in healthcare, or whether they would like to go in a different direction. So with that, what I think I'm going to do, Erica, is open it up for a few questions before we have to go on to the next meeting. And who would like to lead off?
Senator, if they have no questions, I'd like to make a comment. About 5 years ago, Dennis Myers and I wrote you a letter requesting a grant to help us, our hospital, buy a digital CT scanner. And I want to thank you for the $750,000 you sent us.
Thank you,
Our
James.
County Clerk James
I
Phillips.
appreciate that.
And we were the only hospital in Eastern Kentucky that had one for many years.
Circuit Clerk.
I thank you for that.
Thank you, James. I think I'm going to take James on the road with me. You get to introduce me. Seriously, yeah, Doctor.
I mean, what could? I mean, ACA, it's already been passed. It's being implemented. I mean, Obamacare has been enacted. It's been implemented. It's on its way.
Yeah.
What can be done at this point?
Well, look, is it being implemented? The president decided on his own over roughly a half a dozen times to just say never mind about various parts of it. I mean, if he can decide willy-nilly which parts of the law he wants to enforce, then my view is that this is not permanent yet, because he too is, many of my colleagues are arguing without any real authority to do it, which is a whole nother argument. But regardless of whether you think he has the authority to do it or not, on about 24 occasions, he just said, never mind. And some of this has been the heart of the law, like the individual mandate, the employer mandate. So, or both. And so I think he knows, even though he's not going to stand up and say it, watch what he does, not what he says. This is not necessarily here to stay, or he wouldn't keep kind of pushing back various deadlines and saying never mind about this or never mind about that. Now, in the meantime, I know it heightens the confusion for all of you. I mean, it's very difficult for you all to do what you do because, I mean, this was already complex. I know you were in a tough field before Obamacare. You know, Medicare and Medicaid and were not easily worked with before. The trustees of Medicare and Social Security, appointed by President Barack Obama, said Medicare had about 10 years to go before it tanked, before we did Obamacare, and before they took $1 trillion out of it. So I don't think this can possibly work. And the president doesn't want to stand up and say that, and I can understand that. But again, I say watch what he does, not what he says. And look at how they're kind of, whenever they choose to, delaying the implementation.
We have time for one more question, Senator.
I'm just curious. One of the things that we're setting up is K-Connect for our patients, for people that doesn't have insurance, and then they end up having to pay a $140 premium monthly. Then what they fail to tell them sometimes is there's $2,500 deductible that they have to come up with, and then when they go to the doctor's offices, they're coming up with another $40 copay. You know, if this is going to be for the people that can't afford insurance, or for the indigent, how are they going to manage to do that?
Well, you raise a very good point. The indigents, of course, should be eligible for Medicaid, but you are absolutely right about people being forced now to buy insurance, and then the question is, how good is it? If the copay is so high, or the deductible is so high, what more and more people are discovering is, okay, you made me buy it, I bought the best I could, but it doesn't fit my situation. I mean, you've seen the stories about, you know, couples in their 50s and 60s having to buy maternity care and stuff like that. I mean, the government is dictating to the health insurance companies what they may sell. What they may sell. In other words, the U.S. government is now running the health insurance market, rather than private companies who would construct different models to meet different needs. And I think, you know, the view of the Obama administration was all the smart people work for them. And they know a lot more than all of us rubes out across America about how to run our lives. And you've got this kind of centralized mindset that you see on full display in healthcare, we've seen on full display in the war on coal. These people need to be sent packing. That's why we have elections. And I think this is the first year toward moving America in a different direction. Let me just wrap it up by thanking you all for all of the challenges that you have. I want to thank you for the great work you do. All of you healthcare providers could have gone into a different field, but you are the reason we're all living longer and longer. When Social Security was passed in the 30s, the average American, I'm told, lived to be about 61. Medicare was set at 65 in the 60s. Last year, I was informed the average male lived to be 79, the average female lived to be 81. You guys are the reason for that. And for all the challenges and frustrations, I just want to thank you for going into a field where you can go home at night and prop up your feet and say, gee, you know, I actually made somebody feel better today. I saved somebody's life today. I made a difference. And so I wanted to thank all of you for what you have chosen to do with your life, and to tell you how sorry I am we're making it so darn difficult for you to do it with a minimum amount of supervision from Washington. So thanks again for the opportunity to be here. I'm going to get somewhere and shake hands, I hope. We're right over here. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I really appreciate it.
As a board member for the hospital about 12 years and a friend of Senator McConnell, I want to give you this. We may have to write you another letter if we need another scanner, Senator. So you keep us in mind in Clay County. and I want you to fix it so we can keep our hospital here. It's very important to our county. I studied a lot of elections. Senator McConnell gets about 80% of the votes when we vote here in Clay County. So I challenge you in May and November to talk to your neighbors and your friends to go vote. It's the most critical election in my lifetime, and we need to re-elect Senator McConnell. I thank you.
Thank you, James. Thanks a lot.
Senator McConnell's going to be shaking hands now.
How are you?
My good friend Vernon Lunsford with the Clay County Cruisers.
I hope they understand that.
Roger Curry, Senator McConnell.
Yeah. Would you go back to the letter? What is
I'm so sorry.
When I was 44 and I got married, right now,
All right, here we go. Get you right there.
Now, James, that's Terry and
it is amazing.
EKU superintendent.
Good to look forward to seeing you again. You know, he's got a beautiful wife, and you know, they give a lot of time to their country.
Yeah.
You know, today.
Thank you.
So you live in
Everybody waiting to shake hands with the senator. Big Barn Radio has broadcast this event to anybody around the world that wanted to listen to it today. We're excited about that. We're traveling to London to Wildcat Harley-Davidson. That's we've been over at Manchester at Manchester Memorial Hospital with Republican Senate Leader Mitch McConnell. And of course, Senator Robert Stivers, he's from Clay County. He was there. Clay County Circuit Clerk James Phillips. My brother Big Daddy, Roger Dodger Curry, he's the chauffeur today.
Oh, yeah.
And we're heading off to Wildcat Harley-Davidson, that is. Well, we're coming up on Wildcat Harley here, and I'll tell you what, there's a bunch of people here to see the senator.
One. All right. Make sure it took. Yeah, I did. There it is.
Need to get him on the video, it's important. I wanted to see him. Charlie, CBS. Did you get to talk to the senator? Did you speak to the senator yet?
No, I haven't.
Let me get my case and I'll get on. Let me get my little case.
Oh yeah, well I had your case and I thought, well, don't disappear.
No, I was trying to keep track of you. Good crowd here. Senator